No, it's serious now for recording. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have obviously a few people in the room. We've got our wonderful speakers up the front, and we also have a bunch of people online, so good morning to you there. We will also be recording this for anyone who can't make it this morning and wants to watch later. I will get sufficiently out of breath quite quickly because I am pregnant, so please forgive me. Right. Got it. Before we get started, UTS, we would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose ancestral lands our city campus now rests. We would like to pay respect to our elders past, present and emerging, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for this land. So everyone who's online, if you wouldn't mind popping in the chat which of the lands you are joining us from here today. Thank you. So today what we're going to do, I'll give a quick intro about the Early Career Academic Network here at UTS, and then a little quick overview of leadership in academia. Then we're going to be joined by Distinguished Professor Peter Ralph, who's going to talk about leadership in research for us. Then Dr. Kumi De Silva, who will discuss inclusive leadership practice. And then Associate Professor Jan McLean, who will discuss leadership in teaching and learning. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So we might, just in the interest of time, see how we go, but we'll do questions at the end if we can hold off until then. So the UTS ECAN, or Early Career Academic Network, is a university-wide official network. We have people from all different faculties, and the aim of it is to provide a forum for early career academics to collaborate with other early career academics on common issues and challenges related to teaching and research. Now, what I think is quite nice and unique about this is that the network doesn't just deal with research. We are looking at also the other side of being an academic, which is teaching. And today we're actually also acknowledging there's another facet to being an academic, which is the leadership piece. That service engagement and leadership piece that everyone wants to see for our promotion applications and our career progression, but we're not actually addressing that as its own area yet. So we want to start doing that as a whole academic network. We also provide input into programs and mentoring opportunities that support the development of early career academic skills and knowledge. So this is our ECAN steering committee. There's a fair few of us. There's some of us here today. I am one. We have Amy in the front. We have Jacqueline doing our fabulous tech support just around the corner, but it is mostly made up of postdocs, lecturers and senior lecturers from a range of different faculties, which is really, really nice. It's also really nice to be on the committee and have these new networks that I wouldn't really have had I not been on the committee. So it's nice to meet people from other faculties. So leadership as an academic is a really interesting concept for me. I think that, we definitely need to start paying attention a little more to leadership being its own technical discipline. So as opposed to, I come from forensic science, opposed to forensic science being my technical discipline, leadership I also consider to be a technical discipline. I have to keep developing and learning in that area, and then I can bring that into my other areas of teaching and research. Leadership as an academic is very multifaceted. We've got kind of those higher level areas where we need to show leadership as early career academics. So in research, inclusive leadership practice and teaching and learning. And then we've also got all these other areas. So I just wanted to pop this up here so you can see that leadership is not just being a leader. It's not just one part. There's a whole multitude of areas that we need to develop as leaders. But today we're going to focus on these top three, and we have three fabulous speakers who I'm really appreciative of their time and their support to our network who've come to speak to us today. So our first fabulous speaker is Distinguished Professor Peter Ralph, who is the Executive Director of the Climate Change Cluster. How often do people get that right quickly?
It's easy to say C3, that's fine.
Yes. C3. His favourite part of his role is that he's an entrepreneur, so innovating within the university sector. Now, this can take the form of growing spin-outs, new ways of collaborating, new models of career structure for future industry-facing academics, thought leadership, and helping others to build that particular skill, and mentoring future organisational servant leaders. So if we could just give a quick round of applause for Distinguished Professor Peter Rush.
Thanks, Mackenzie. I don't have slides.
But if you need
but-
it, it's there.
Yeah, I can do that. So thanks for the introduction. It's really, I look forward to these opportunities to spend time providing ideas. As an older academic, I learnt all my leadership through doing not what bad leaders did. Back when I was your stage, there was no mentoring. We didn't really recognise that we had to grow future generations of leaders. And so I reflect on my growth, and I just so wished I had people that have been through the battles and solved some of the problems and provide the insight. So to give a bit of background, apart from leading C3 for the past 15 years, I've worked in CSIRO clusters where I've had 150 staff and 8 universities. So I've got a broad understanding of what other universities in Australia do. I've led programs with the UN. I've led European country review programs. I was just in Europe last week and I had a review of the Czech Academy of Science. And part of my job is to understand how the ECRs and the Czech Academy of Science are going forward. So I based a lot of my comments on a broad background. So the importance of leadership is for an organisation to understand its vision, the organisation's vision, is being implemented through the structure of the organisation. Now, I'm not saying university here, I'm saying organisation, because I think the way I function is I treat the university as a corporation, not as a business, but a corporation. A lot of people want to see universities as something special and different, but I'll give you some examples of leadership where it doesn't really matter whether we're CommBank or UTS, it's leadership. So for an organisation to function, we as workers can't be running off in a million different directions doing exactly what we want. We need to be following the organisation's core directions. So there needs to be a pipeline of vision that comes down to smaller groups. Smaller groups have to function as a group. We as individuals will not achieve anything in our academic research careers or our teaching careers if we don't work effectively with people. And this is the challenge. That's where leadership comes in. So everyone, I believe, in an organisation should have the opportunity to step up, to say, okay, I want to try my hand at doing leadership. And if I don't do brilliantly at it, I need to be able to step back in a humble and non-confrontational way and go, I had a shot at it, it wasn't my bag, and I'm not embarrassed for trying. All organisations need to have structures that allow everyone to try their hand at leadership. Now, what's different between CommBank and UTS? Leadership generally is called servant leadership. You are a servant, and that's where my descriptor of my role, I see myself as a servant leader. My job is to serve the institute that I lead and to ensure that the careers of everyone, academic and professional, is a rewarding career. I have to provide the vision. I have to set the culture. I have to nurture and grow how everyone moves forward. That brings everyone together. So the individuals are not functioning as I'm a frog researcher or I'm a photosynthesis researcher. You know, the challenge of a school to bring together so many disparate people and to have them working as a single unit is quite a challenge. So servant leaders occur in CommBank and also in schools, deans, and units across in the tower. However, there's a second type of leader in university academia, and that fits within the research area. There's the alpha leaders. These are people that build a structure around themselves, around their discipline, and academia supports that. Be careful. It's very easy to fall into that role, and there's a lot of examples of that. But you've got to remember, the organisation doesn't, I'm going to pick on my discipline, and frog researchers, to give you an example. How many ARC grants can we get on frog research? How many people around the globe are interested in frog research? 50, 100, 200? How much does the Australian government need to invest in frog research? How many industries and society needs to invest in frog research? My background is non-photochemical quenching and photosynthesis. I love electron transport, but you'll never hear me talking about that. That's my interest and passion. But I lead an institute with coral researchers, with microbial ecologists, with biotechnologists, carbon capture. So my interest is down here. I lead and support an institute where everyone is promoted, and I'm translating the university's vision into what our team of 100 people do. So servant leadership is really important, as opposed, I suggest, to alpha leadership. Alpha leadership, you will blossom and everyone will love you for 5 years, and then you'll crash and burn because there's just not enough money in frog research to keep that institute or that team going forever. Now, I told you a little bit about servant leadership. Universities, once again, are unique because we're all a bunch of very gifted people. You do not have to be the smartest person in the room to be the leader of the team. You need to have respect, academic respect, research respect in research leadership, but you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. What you do need is EQ, not IQ. And that's the thing that we look for. We need to be able to find individuals that can sense and understand the flock that you're working with, the people you're serving. If you can't be aware of them, you're not going to be a good leader. And so this is the thing where I said, people step up, have a shot at leadership. And if you just don't have the skills, I have very poor EQ. I'm 60 years old and I still have to keep learning. Oh, Peter, you walked past somebody, the hairs on the back of your neck prickled up and you thought there was a problem, but you didn't say something. So I've got to take myself back and say, oh, look, I know you mentioned this. How are you going on that? It's less about my strategy and leadership. It's more about the care and nurturing, and to ensure that the people in C3 know that they know that I've got their back. That's really important. It's not, C3 is not about me. C3 is about all of us delivering. So EQ is really important to learn and understand. I'm going to show you some, I will show you this. So these are, if any of you ever come into my office, all of these things are stuck up around, you did put that in? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, I wasn't sure. Okay, these are all stuck up around my office. I pulled them down to bring today. These are reminders to me. These are the kind of mental notes that help me. So have a quick read through them. They're random things that I've found over my time that when I start to think, I'm not focusing on my leadership, this is the best one. Great leaders don't set out to be leaders, they set out to make a difference. It's never about the role, it's about the goal. So I want to fix the planet. Whether I fix the planet as a single researcher or as the leader of C3, that is my goal. I create a vision around that. People want to follow a vision, and so therefore that's why they want that leadership and mission. Toxic bosses, Harry Truman's statement. It's amazing what you can accomplish when it doesn't matter who takes the credit. The leader never takes the credit. It's always about the institute. And if I get reflected glory for a fantastic institute, that's good enough. So I think there's some of my insights into research leadership. What I will spend a couple of minutes talking about is 3 different types of research-based ECR leadership: industry, academia, and research directors. The hardest one and the newest one is how to have ECRs working in industry and how for them to have leadership roles in industry and come back to universities. I'm working actively with UTS at the moment and HR to try and create another HR position. So we have balanced academics, we have teaching intensive, we have research intensive, we will have leadership intensive roles. I want to have an industry one as well, so that we can support people going out and in. We spent a lot of time talking about the academic leadership. That's quite simple. The only thing I'd guide you is find a mentor and make it a two-way traffic. Don't make it one-way traffic where you build your network from your mentor, you build your group from the mentor, but you don't feed anything back to the mentor. The mentor will be generous and will give you these things, but make it a two-way street. The final one is how to turn ECRs into directors. That's really tough. I have 5 mentees, 2 in C3, 1 in another faculty, 2 overseas, and both the overseas mentees are research director roles, and they're ECRs that I'm growing into being able to be a director. That is really tough. That's long term. I've been doing both these for about 5 years, and that's situational. You have to put them in or they have to be put into a situation, a complex situation. You have to reflect on the solutions, and they have to actually learn how to do it. But that's a really rewarding role, is when you can find somebody who has to learn, because they are a future director, they have to learn how to research lead. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm happy to answer lots of questions after we've had the rest of our presentations. So I hope there's some use in those comments. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, so I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Kumi De Silva. So Kumi is a Gender Equity Programs Manager here at UTS, where her role mainly involves overseeing the ANTHIS 1 programs, I should say. The programs seek to identify and remove or reduce the structural, systematic and cultural barriers that obstruct the attraction, retention and progression of staff. So what does Kumi enjoy most about her role? So what she enjoys most is the opportunity to work with others who are equally committed to supporting UTS to be an inclusive workplace. So thank you, Kumi, and welcome.
Thank you for the invitation to talk to you today about this topic that I'm really passionate about. So I should start by saying that for 20 plus years, I was an academic. I'm a scientist. I'm an immunologist by training, and I've worked at the University of Sydney for almost 2 decades, just shy of that. And decided I needed to do something else and have more impact in what I'm doing. And I really enjoyed the kind of gender equity support and the racial equity support work I was doing at the University of Sydney. And that's why I'm here, because UTS offered me this position to be here. So why is inclusive leadership important? Because I feel that it's a job for everyone, not just people like me who have equity or inclusion in the title of their job. And this kind of resonates very strongly through what you heard before, the equitable treatment of everyone, creating a sense of belonging and value, and then ultimately providing resources for people to achieve their full potential. And this can be different for different people. So I'm going to touch on 3 things that I think are important in someone who is an inclusive leader, and that's: one is self-awareness, the other is around psychological safety, and the third is around a visual presence. So self-awareness, I'm sure comes from all our life experiences, from the time you were a child, so to the type of family you grew up in, where you were located geographically, and then you collect other experiences through travel, working in different countries, different organizations, your work experiences, the people you surround yourself with. So you're looking through, your perspective is sort of through this very integrated lens of all the experiences you bring. So I think self-awareness is really important, because then if you recognize what you do well and what you struggle with, you can use tools and strategies to kind of overcome that. So you get better at making decisions. And I think what's really important is that if you understand yourself, then you get an appreciation for differences that other people might have and different perspectives that they will bring into the situation. So I'm just throwing these 2 things out there. If anyone's looking for tools for self-awareness, I get no commission from any of these, but these are things that I have been subjected to in the past because I was very hesitant to be labeled by, the Myers-Briggs type tools. But there are, and I do like the Herman brain dominance instrument, as well as Luminous Spark. What I like about the Luminous Spark model is that it gives equal weighting to different things. So introvert is not any better or worse than extrovert. They both have their strengths and values that you bring in. And with the Luminous Spark model, they actually, you answer hundreds and hundreds of questions, and they then give you a profile of what you are inherently, what you're like day to day, and then what you are like under stress. So for me, a great revelation was that, I've always been an introverted person. When I first started out as a young scientist, I would never see myself up here talking like this to a group of really intelligent people. So what that showed me was in my day-to-day, I dial up my extrovertness to the other extreme, right? And so the other thing is that I'm very detail oriented. So that can be a good thing day-to-day when you're managing a project. But when I'm under stress, when I'm working to a deadline, I become very controlling. And so for me, that self-awareness was very important to tell my team, we got that deadline coming. I'm going to be, starting to be not so friendly anymore. Pick me up on it and let's talk about it. Don't let me get into that state. So it kind of helps me work through situations as well. I just want to briefly touch on the difference between equality and equity. And I'm sure you know a lot about this, and you might have seen variations of this image. This was the very first image that sparked that discussion. So equality is giving everyone the same opportunities and the same resources. So in that image, under equality, you can see everyone's been given the box, and that, little person in the blue shirt still can't see over the fence. There's a barrier there. Equity is trying to look at redistributing these resources, because now the tallest person no longer has that box, but you're redistributing resources so everyone has equal opportunities. So equity is looking at giving people resources to have similar outcomes. So equalness of opportunity is what we're looking at there. So psychological safety, I think, is not talked about a lot, but I think is pretty important. And this was something that a professor at the Harvard Business School talked about. And it's this belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. And academia is a very hierarchical structure, usually, traditionally, right? You're very hesitant as a young scientist to talk about your failures in the experiment. So I remember at lab meetings, weekly lab meetings, we'd have, if something failed, it's like, oh my God, I'm not going to talk today. I'm not going to tell anyone about this because I don't want to talk about it. But we should be open. And so as an inclusive leader, I think being vulnerable and authentic in your communication is important. You need to model that. You say, hey, we're working on this question. I'm a bit hesitant about this. What do you think? And be open to others' perspectives. Be curious of other people's perspectives. Be explicit that you are looking for genuine feedback. You're not just looking for people to say yes to you and agree to your plan of any kind, right? But you need to give people that safety. So if they don't have that psychological safety, they're not going to speak up. And this is not something that can happen instantaneously. It has to be cultivated in many, many different ways. And when I was postdocing in Chicago, I remember my supervisor was this fantastic person who would take us out for a meal. It was just at some local food court, sandwich bar kind of place. But every month he'd take everyone and we'd just have a chat. And I didn't realize until, decades later, just how team bonding that was. And we talk about different things, not just work, not just about that experiment, but about life experiences and what we were going through. And it made you feel really comfortable and valued, and you felt that you belonged in that place. So you as a leader need to then set that tone that challenging ideas is okay. And I would add sort of one other thing about that as an inclusive leader. Just think about who you talk to in your team or the people around you every day. I know I gravitate to the people who have similar interests as me. And then, there's this area so we have an open plan office at the Center for Social Justice and Inclusion. And there's pockets of that floor that I don't normally gravitate to. because they talk sport and I'm not interested in sport. But when I catch myself and I say, okay, I'll go and talk to them about this. I have this little bit of knowledge about soccer by talking to my kids. So I'll go and talk to them about something and try and be involved in part of that. So the opposite of the communication part is the listening. So especially at meetings, as a leader, you do have to set the ground rules, no interruptions, let everyone finish their train of thought before someone, sometimes you get really enthusiastic and you say, oh yeah, I thought about this too and I want to do this. But, try to hold back. And as a leader, I think you play a really important role in these meetings to set that tone. And the self-awareness part of listening is be aware of your reaction. So if someone challenges someone, I said very well, set that tone that people can challenge you. But when someone challenges me, and this is a plan I've put together for weeks, and I think I've researched it all and I know everything about it, and someone challenges you and I go, oh my God, I didn't think about that kind of thing. And so you're reacting. So part of that listening is being aware how you react, sometimes asking for a pause and, being upfront. Oh, I didn't think about that. Let's talk about it a bit more. Send me some information of where of your perspectives and let's talk about it. So being aware of your reactions is important. So that pause when your instinct is to be defensive, and ask curious questions rather than being critical. So why, things like, oh, why do you think that? What made you think that's kind of different? And invite other people's opinions into that conversation as well. And then part of this psychological safety is really to model the behavior that you want to see, normalize that experiencing failure is okay. And you need to celebrate not just the successes, but perhaps just, risk-taking behaviors where you might not have failed. And it's that, okay, let's have cake today and think about what happened there? Like, what can we do better next time we come up with this same problem? And I think giving feedback is important, but also seeking 360 feedback, right? So not just from your line manager or your head of school. Seek feedback from the postdocs, students, people, you talk to, because that can be very important as well. And so this is where creating psychological safety becomes extremely important, because they're not going to tell you the truth if they're kind of scared about how you're going to react to this situation. I like these two books. Again, no endorsement, but just things I read. The Psychological Safety Playbook is a really interesting read, is a quick read. It just gives you those practical tools of how to start these conversations. And the Better Allies book by Karen Caitlin is also very, very interesting and inspiring. So finally, this visual presence. Cliche, networking is really important. And it's not just to create your network, but it's to look at who's missing. Who are you talking? Again, it's that who are you talking to? Who are you not talking to? And I would really encourage to network out of your comfort zone. So go to those events that you normally won't go to. If you don't normally go to the International Women's Day event that UTS runs, fabulous event this year, you must come next year. Bring a friend along, go to that event. The center runs really fantastic events. We had a few people talk on International Mother Language Day about their experience with migrants as people who speak different languages in Australia. Come to those events. And it's very important as a leader to be seen to be doing those things. It's not just for the minions, it's for all of us. It's part of what I feel is important. So therefore it's important for my team. Bring your team along to these events. And I know we are all busy. We don't have time to go to these extra things. Try to make time to do those things. Finally, I kind of wanted to put this in your minds, sort of looking at the broader equity perspective. When you look at any kind of situation, try to look at who is experiencing these unequal outcomes. So what's the process of normalizing this inequity? And I think most importantly, what is the role that I am playing unintentionally by following certain policies and procedures, because that's the way it's done. And it's up to all of us, because we bring different experiences and perspectives, which might not have been seen by those people who wrote the policies and procedures, right? So we need to speak up, and the more of us that do it, the better it's going to be. And I'm going to finish up by saying that I didn't have this when I sent Mac slides, but yesterday, there was a professor from the NIH, Professor Manu Platt, who addressed the National Press Club in Canberra. Fantastic orator. I have never heard him speak before, but what a wonderful human being, and very engaging, and had lots of fantastic things that I could not talk about in detail through his experiences. And it is available through ABC iView. So I would suggest Googling it and spending the hour and a half. It takes an hour and a half because you have to listen to all the questions at the end as well. But take the time and listen to it if you want to learn a bit more about inclusive leadership. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'd like to welcome our third speaker, Jan McLean. So Jan is the director of the Institute of Interactive Media and Learning. She's an associate professor and researcher in higher education and development, with a particular interest in the effects of the changing higher education context on academic life and practice, as well as student belonging and learning. So Jan's favorite thing about her job is helping people reach their full potential in learning and teaching. So welcome, thank you.
Thank you. This is just to keep me on track. So if I give me a prompt for time. Thanks so much. It's wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to listen to the other speakers. So thank you so much. I'm not a scientist, but my first degree is in science. I have a Bachelor of Science. So there we are. There's a good science connection. I came to uni to become a marine biologist, like quite a few people, but I meandered into education. And then I ended up doing a PhD. My PhD research is on becoming an academic in the modern contemporary university, really looking about the impacts of the place, the context upon how we actually progress, the things that include and exclude. So we'll have to have some more conversations, I think, about that. I'm actually talking to you about teaching and learning. And I think I'm going to bring a different angle to thinking about leadership. And I'm going to bring the angle of thinking about leadership as influence, action, and impact. And so it's not necessarily the position of a leader. It's the role you play in the position you're in, and how you start to affect and take up more roles, so you actually take on roles and build that leadership potential. And so you see yourself as an enabler of something. And I'd like to encourage you to think holistically as well, and build a narrative that connects your teaching with your research and your engagement. And I think the way to do that, it touches on what Peter has talked about already, about what you value and care about influencing. You're in a university usually for a purpose. We usually come here because we do care about making a difference to something, often care deeply about equity, sustainability, the world. So we're here to do something. So trying to find what it is you really care about. And the thing to do, and I think this again picks up on the previous speakers, it's shaping your direction aligned to what the university wants to do. If you find there's a real misalignment between the values of the place you're in and your values, you're probably not in the right place. But academia is a wonderful thing. You can actually meander around lots of places. And we've got lots of strategies, and there's different ways of connecting yourself to the strategy. And that's, I think, when you do connect that, that's when you start to thrive in a place. So it's really thinking through how you do that. The other point I'm making here is context is really important. I mean, I care about context. I'm fascinated by the changing context of higher education and how it impacts on us. Particularly at the moment, generative AI is really shifting things. And I think all of us are thinking about this. We're probably all using ChatGPT to do things. I didn't use generative AI to write this, by the way. But it's really interesting as a leader and an emerging leader to think about how is the context affecting us, start to read the context. I look to the people in my leadership team, and IML is a funny name, but it's a learning and teaching unit of the university. I look to them to say what's going on in relation to assessment out there. Come and let me know what's going on. So learning to read that context and be thinking about how it affects UTS, how it affects your school, how it affects your faculty, how it affects your role, and actually be thinking with that all the time. There's lots of places you can apply your leadership. I mean, this is just a smattering of some of them, and you've heard others. Leadership comes when you're thinking about how you lead, manage, and teach. And it might be that you're teaching subjects, and so you can actually start to influence there. Obviously, influencing the students, and I'll talk about the kind of ripple effect of that influence in the next slide. But you might be involved in designing a developed curriculum, and it might be that you start with subjects and then you actually take on more of a role of a cluster of subjects and you become a team leader, or you might be taking on a teaching of a course. So you start to move towards taking on more, more responsibility. You might be introducing innovations, and you might be an early adopter of something. And by being an early adopter, going back to the idea of influence, other people around you might go, oh, you've been using these things, like ChatGPT, one. Some people just love starting to use new things. Other people might look to you and say, oh, can you tell me a bit about that? And actually start to influence in that way. There's also thinking about different strategies and approaches you introduce. And I think a lot of us care. We're in higher education. I think we care about equity. I am, certainly. And the student experience. And I think thinking through how do you actually introduce things that might affect some change in those areas as well. The student experience is a really critical part of what we all do. We all talk about what we do, but that idea of impact is to what end? Who does it influence? And influencing students is a really, obviously, big important part of a university. And it might be that you've played roles, for instance, I used an acronym there, the Indigenous Graduate Attribute is the IGA. It may be that you play a role with that and you can start to have a bit more influence. I mean, you might influence it, introduce it into a subject, but it's an attribute, so it has to go across the course. So you might actually play a role in introducing into other subjects. You might be leading others. It may be one-to-one, or it might be leading people through teams, maybe other tutors or tutors in your subject, or it might be a project group. So these are less formal leadership roles, but they're opportunities for you to take up. Participating on committees, it's a really good way to get to be known. Find yourself, volunteer for committees if you can. You learn how things work in a place. Committees could be school, faculty, learning and teaching committees. They could also be academic board. It's always fascinating to see how academic board works. Being part of strategic projects, but there's often calls for different strategic projects that might be slightly outside of what you've been doing, but those opportunities exist, again, at different levels. And within the university, there's the school, obviously, the faculty, the university, but there's also your disciplinary ones. So it might be that you have those opportunities that present. Engaging in pedagogic research and grants as well. So that's another area you can actually take up. And we have grants, for instance, for first and third year experience. I know some of you have been involved in those. I know Max certainly has. And that's an opportunity to actually do some, it's not really research grants, they're actually teaching grants to actually try to make a difference to a particular area in relation to the student experience. I also use the so what all the time. It's all very well to say what you do, but what's the impact this has? And sorry, that diagram's a bit blurry. I couldn't find a nice sharp one, so I'll refer to that in a moment. But I think the thing is to think about impact in different layers. And I think starting with where you are now, the impact might be quite local. It might be you impacting your students in the teaching context. So you might be having an impact on their learning, hopefully, impact on their experience. But as you progress as a leader, you might broaden that impact. And this ladder is actually really helpful because it actually starts to show how leadership and impact starts to grow the more positions you have. And so initially it might be more local, and then you may take on roles where you say you're teaching a subject, other people look to that subject if it's got some innovation in it, and that you start to influence other subjects and how they're taught. Or it might be that you actually start to influence the course that you're teaching into. Or you might be influencing colleagues around you. So you gradually start to broaden that sphere of influence and impact. So that's a really, I won't talk more about that diagram. But one thing I'd actually urge you to do right now, if you haven't already done that, is to start to keep a portfolio of all the evidence that you collect around your the work that you're doing. The emails that come in from people saying, hey, that was great, the student feedback, looking at how students are learning. Just try to keep a whole collection of that, because when it comes to things like promotion, those are like pieces of gold. You'll actually say, oh, I can pull these together into an argument, a case for my teaching in that promotion application. And always, so you're on a committee. Why were you on the committee? What effect did you have? Why were you invited? You might be invited because you were seen as someone who was innovative. That's a great thing to include. So include all these things in your evidence. And keep an eye on how evidence and leadership is talked about. There's promotion. I think last time you did careers, I think, yeah. So I think you've got that. Promotion and faculty benchmarks. You can actually have a look at leadership in there, and you'll start to see how it gets talked about in the ways I'm talking about it, more as that kind of influence rather than necessarily a particular role. So, my time, yeah. Be strategic, that's been touched on already. There's lots of strategies. You can always dip into different strategies. The 2027 strategies, there's some related to learning and teaching, particularly lifetime of learning, our distinctive identity. Really interesting to delve into what does the university value and what we want to graduate our students to be. There's a distinctiveness there, and it's really, I can talk about that anytime, but I won't go into detail. We have some strategies around learning futures, the UTS model of learning that talk about how we go about our learning and teaching and what we want to achieve in it. And there's a student experience framework, which our new Deputy Vice Chancellor Education students, Kylie Reedman, who you saw last time, has introduced. And this is the framework. I'm not going to talk in detail about it, but you'll see that it's a framework for the student experience, and it has these different areas. And belonging is a really important one, wellbeing, partnerships, working with students. And I think that's a lovely place to start thinking about. I really care about some of this stuff. I'd love to get involved in this. And you can actually pick up one area that's sort of one that you relate to a little bit more and start going a bit deeper. And that's I put a link in to this framework so you can have a look at that yourselves. I won't speak to it, but if belonging is really your thing, there's a chance to really think about that and how you actually think, how can I enhance belonging in my classes, in my courses, in my school? And so just to finish up, I think the really important thing to do is to seek opportunities. If opportunities don't come to you, look for them. Try to position yourself so you actually meet people. The important thing is to try to get yourself known, and so you actually start to get opportunities for leadership. Unless you actually start to make yourself a bit visible there, you may not get those opportunities. And some people get them more easily than others. Some people arrive and the opportunities are handed to them, and some people need to work much harder. But I really want you to position yourself as well as you can to find some advocates. Find out where the resources get allocated. Get in there and get some of those resources. Ask people around you to say, who's the person that helps with these sorts of things? So find yourself some mentors. Join committees, volunteer for those, I've talked about that. Help others, assist others to get started, and to develop their practice. It might be you mentor people, it may be you actually start to do some extra work within your school. Be strategic, I talked about that. And also there's lots of opportunities to build your capability in learning and teaching and leadership. There's lots here at UTS, the LX site has lots of events and things you can attend. We have a graduate certificate in higher education, learning and teaching if you want to go a bit deeper. There's also great self-paced MOOCs and different courses online. Contemporary approaches to university teaching has a module on leadership, so it might be something you dip into and have a look at. But these are all being created by, they're kind of shared across institutions, so they're very collegial MOOCs. And then there's external events and conferences. And I think that idea of networking is actually really critical, getting in there. I still remember my first conference. I was so uncomfortable and thinking, oh my God, how do I go and talk to somebody? Just that over time, I forced myself to do that over time to get better at doing that sort of thing. And I guess the goal, and it was lovely to see you had something about goals in your little notes. I'm suggesting you shape the leader you want to become. Seek opportunities and do the things you value in learning and teaching and research and engagement that you think where you would like most to have impact. Align it to your disciplinary and institutional priorities. And there you make a contribution and you enhance your career in the process. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jan. What a fabulous selection of speakers we've had across those different areas. And I think I certainly am feeling quite inspired to go and do a bit more and get myself out there a little bit more. And I hope you guys are too. So we actually have a few questions that are coming through online, but I will throw to the room first. Does anyone in here have any questions?
When you referenced the gentleman speaking press club yesterday, what was so powerful was that I didn't even hear him speak, but I was in Cafe 10 getting my lunch and he was on, and his presence without even hearing him speak was so powerful. And he had the audio or the press club.
Yeah.
They were completely engaged. It
Yeah.
was just So yeah, so I'm going to go home and watch him.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for endorsing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, we'll try to find the link to that
Yeah.
and we'll pop it in the ACO network team site. Are there any more questions or comments from the room? Yeah.
Hi, thanks so much for the panel there. Just perhaps a provocational question to you, Professor Peter. You were talking about how emotional intelligence is really important, and especially this notion of being the servant leader. But what we still see is that the big names in academia are often the people that have done the ego work and that are the alpha leaders, and that expect more junior researchers to sort of follow their priorities. So how would you say we go about it as someone with less power in a more junior role in showing that emotional intelligence and achieving what we want to in terms of our collective and individual goals?
Great question. Two answers. First answer, I think there's many more alpha institutes out there than there is servant institutes. So my guidance is not to leave the alpha one. Hone your skills, learn capacity, learn mentorship and leadership if you're able to do it within the alpha structure. But alternatively, leave the alpha structure and find an institute where your growth is going to be supported, because all that the alpha structure does is create more alphas, and the world doesn't need more alphas. They just generate, and they will always be with us. But organizations, universities need servant leaders, and they're the hard ones to grow. So you will not grow the skills in an alpha institute to be a servant leader, because that'll be beaten out of you. And I hope I'm not offending anyone, but that's the honest answer to a really deceptive question.
And Peter, I might get you to stay there. We've got a question online from Stephanie. So Stephanie, did you want to pop off mute and ask Peter your question?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, thank you to all the speakers. Really enjoyed all of those.
Sorry.
Here we go.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, you can? Okay, great. I was just saying thank you to all the speakers. I really enjoyed all of those presentations. Peter, my question was for you, I think just because it tapped into my insecurities around mentorship, and as somebody who has just started out in the academic world and has found a mentor recently, I was sort of wondering what, when you're talking about the two-way nature of that relationship, I was sort of thinking, oh, what can I even offer somebody who's, you know, providing generous time and guidance for me? I just wondered whether you had any ideas around what you have received from junior people in that mentor relationship, or had any advice around that.
Yeah, another really good question. Let me start out by giving you the opposite of what I was describing as the non-two-way relationship. The ECR joins the lab. They know that I have a particular group of networks. I introduce them to all of the networks. They take my partnerships off. They start building them themselves. And I lose track on the relationship. Whereas if the ECR builds a relationship with one of my partners, keep me in the loop, still build it, but don't leave me out of it. And I think that's one of the things that a future alpha leader is going to do in a servant structure, and they're going to take those relationships out of the old structure. But the two-way engagement is massive, because the thing is, the mentor will be learning from the mentee all the time. Openness and letting us understand where our guidance is not working for you. So there's so many things to learn. The only problem, I told you that I've got 5 mentees. I can't take on any more. And I think the real challenge is finding the people willing to do the mentoring and get into their sphere of activities. So the fact that you found one is awesome. And nurture it and give back to the relationship through comments, guidance, and seeing it as a two-way deal. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you so much.
There's no more questions in the room. We don't have any more online at the moment. Can we give a final round of applause to our fabulous speakers? Please? Now, just loved the day. That was awesome. Thank you, guys. The UTS Early Career Academic Network will be hosting more events throughout the year. We'll make sure that we disseminate those events far and wide, so we can make sure that we are hitting the targets and getting what our early career academics from UTS actually want. If you guys wouldn't mind just leaving us some feedback on this particular event, and we can feed that forward into our other events. No feedback is bad feedback. We'll take all of it on board as we move forward. We hope that those of you online have enjoyed being able to attend this. We normally do these events face to face, but we are lucky to have this beautiful space in the Res Hub where we do have the tech to enable us to do it. Big thank you to Wade Tozer, who does very wholeheartedly support the Early Career Academic Network, and to Dr. Jacqueline Melvold, who is doing our tech support today. I walked in and she said, "So how are we going to do this?" And I said, "I don't know. My plan was to give my mobile phone and stream that and just turn it on everyone." So I'm very appreciative for that support today. And that is it. Thank you very much. One last thank you to our speakers.